Walk out into your yard tomorrow morning, just after first light, before the sun has cleared the trees. Your shoes will be soaked through before you reach the mailbox. Every blade of grass, every rail on the fence, beaded with water. Water that nobody poured, that fell from nothing, out of the open air, in the dark, while you slept. And by 10 o'clock it will all be gone, lifted back into the sky, and you'll never once think about the gallons that just vanished off your own grass for free. But there were people, not so long ago, who would have grieved at the thought of all that water going to waste. People in hard times, in dry years, when the wells ran low, who learned to catch it before the sun could take it back. My name is Pastor Eli, and today I'm going to show you how to harvest water straight out of the open air, the way the old believers did in the lean years, for about $12 in materials. A simple collector you can set out tonight and find water in by morning. I'll show you the science of why it works, so you understand it in your bones. I'll show you the way they did it with nothing but a cloth, the same picture you'll find in the book of Judges. And for those of you who live where the fog rolls in off the water or down off the mountain, I'll show you how to pull gallons out of the mist. But I'd be a poor shepherd if I sent you out there with a promise I can't keep. So I'm going to tell you honestly how much water you can expect, which is not as much as some folks on the internet will claim. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to keep that water safe. Because water from the air is not the same as water from a clean tap. And I won't let you learn that the hard way. Stay with me for both, because the honest version is the only version worth having. And there is one mistake, one simple thing, that is the whole difference between waking up to a jar full of clear water and waking up to a dry sheet, and a feeling that I lied to you. Nearly everyone gets it wrong the first time. I'll show you exactly what it is so you don't. Let me tell you how this came back to me, because I'd half forgotten it myself. A man in our congregation gave me his grandmother's Bible last year, a great heavy thing with a cracked leather cover. And he asked me to keep it because none of his children wanted it. Folded into the back of it behind the family record where the births and deaths were written in fading ink, there was a letter. Written in 1935, in the worst of the dry years, by a woman in Oklahoma to her sister back east. Most of it was the ordinary news of a hard season, but one line stopped me cold. She wrote, and I'll say it close to the way she put it, that the well had gone to mud, but the Lord still sent the dew, and the children spread the blankets every night, and they had not gone thirsty yet. The blankets every night. That woman, in the middle of the Dust Bowl, with her well turned to mud, was laying out blankets to catch the dew and wringing them out for her children in the morning. And she wrote it down not as some clever trick, but as a small daily mercy, proof that they had not been forgotten. I sat with that letter a long while, because she knew something we have let ourselves forget, and I want to give it back to you today. Let me start with where this water comes from, because once you understand it, the rest makes simple sense, and you'll never look at a wet lawn the same way again. The air around you, the air in your yard right now, is not empty. It is full of water. Invisible water, in the form of vapor, floating in the air the way sugar dissolves invisible into a glass of tea. You cannot see it, but it is there, in enormous quantity. On a warm, muggy summer day, the air over a single acre of ground holds more water than you could carry in a wheelbarrow. The trouble is getting it to come out of the air and into your hands. Here is the key to the whole thing. Warm air holds a great deal of that invisible water. Cool air holds much less. So when air cools down, it reaches a point where it simply cannot hold all the water it was carrying, and that water has to go somewhere. It comes out onto the nearest surface as liquid, drops. We have a name for the temperature where that happens. We call it the dew point. And we have a name for the water that comes out. We call it dew. Now here is the part the old folks understood without ever using these words. At night, after the sun goes down, a surface that faces the open sky does something remarkable. It throws its heat up into the sky, into the cold of space, and it cools itself down faster than the air around it. A clean sheet of metal or plastic laid out under an open sky on a clear night will grow colder than the air, colder than the dew point, and the moment it drops below that dew point, the water vapor in the air touching it turns to liquid and beads up all over it. The surface pulls the water right out of the night air. That is dew. That is what soaks your grass every morning. The grass faced the open sky all night, cooled below the dew point, and the air gave up its water onto every blade. We are simply going to do the same thing on purpose with a surface built to catch it and a place to let it run down and collect. And that brings me straight to the mistake I warned you about, because it lives right here in this one idea. The surface has to see the open sky, the whole open sky with nothing over it. That is everything. If you set your collector under a tree, under a porch roof, under an overhang, even under a single large branch, it will not work. Because the tree and the roof are warm, they throw their own heat back down onto your collector and keep it from cooling below the dew point. Your collector needs a clear, open view straight up to the night sky, the cold of space above it, nothing in between. Set it in the open middle of the yard, away from the house, away from the trees, and it will pull water all night. Set it up against the wall or under the eave to keep it tidy and out of the way, and you will find it bone dry in the morning and never know why. That is the mistake. Open sky or nothing. Remember it, and you are already ahead of nearly everyone who tries this. Now let me show you how the believers did it in the hard times, because it is humbling how simple it was. In the dry years, in the dust years, when the wells ran low and the rain would not come, folks learned to lay out a clean wool fleece, or a folded cotton sheet, or a stack of clean rags on the open ground overnight. Wool was best because wool holds water like nothing else. They would spread it on the grass in the open, under the clear sky, and leave it through the cold of the night. And in the gray of the morning, before the sun could steal it back, they would go out and gather up that fleece, heavy now, soaked through, and they would wring it out with their 2 hands into a clean basin. A fleece left out overnight on a good clear night can give you a bowl of clean water, wrung out by hand, costing nothing at all. If that picture sounds familiar to you, it should, because it is exactly what Gideon did in the book of Judges. He laid a fleece of wool on the threshing floor overnight, and in the morning he wrung the dew out of it, and the scripture says he wrung a bowl full of water from that fleece. That was not a miracle of invention. That was a man doing what shepherds had always done, using it as a sign. The dew on the fleece was common knowledge. It was how people who had nothing still found water. And it still works tonight in your own backyard, exactly as it worked on that threshing floor 3,000 years ago. A wool blanket, the open ground, a clear night, and your own 2 hands in the morning. Now let me show you how to build the $12 collector that catches more than a cloth can, the one you can set up tonight. You need 3 things. First, a smooth, clean surface that will cool fast and let the water run off. A sheet of food-grade plastic sheeting works, the clear, heavy kind, a few dollars at the hardware store. Even better, if you can find a scrap of it, is a sheet of clean metal, like a piece of galvanized roofing, because metal sheds its heat fast and cools quickly. Second, something to angle that surface, so the drops of dew run downhill instead of sitting in place. A couple of bricks, a scrap of wood, anything to tilt it at a gentle slope. Third, a clean container at the low edge to catch the water as it runs down. A clean glass jar, an enamel basin, a food-safe bucket. That is the whole machine. A sheet, a tilt, and a jar. $12, and most of that is the sheet. Here is how you set it. In the open part of your yard, away from every tree and roof and wall, with the whole sky open above it, you prop your sheet at a gentle angle, maybe the slope of a cellar door. You make sure the low edge drips into your clean jar or basin, or runs down a clean strip of cloth into it like a wick. You set it out in the evening, clean and dry, and you leave it to face the sky all night. In the morning, before the sun is full up, you go out. If the night was right, clear and calm, and the air carrying some moisture, that sheet will be running with water, and it will be dripping steadily into your jar. You will have caught, out of the open air, with no power and no pump and no bill, water that was invisible the evening before. I set one out myself last September, after that letter got into my head and wouldn't leave. Just a sheet of plastic off a roll, tilted on 2 bricks, in the open part of the yard behind the church. I'll be honest, the first night I got almost nothing, because I'd set it too near the oak tree, and I'll come back to why that matters. But the second night, out in the open, I went out at dawn in my robe and slippers, and there was a jar with better than a cup of clean water in it, water I'd watched come from nowhere. I stood there in the wet grass holding that jar, an old man in his bathrobe, and I'll tell you I felt closer to that woman in Oklahoma than I'd felt to most people I've met in person. She was right, the Lord still sends the dew. Now let me tell you about the one spot in your yard that will give you the most, because placement is half the battle. Cold air is heavy, it sinks. At night, the coldest air in your yard rolls downhill and pools in the low places, the hollow, the dip, the bottom of the slope. And the colder the air around your collector, the more water it will give. So if you have a low spot in your yard, an open hollow with a clear view of the sky, that is where your collector belongs. Not the high ground, not the hilltop, the low open hollow where the cold settles. Put your sheet there, sky open above it, and you will gather noticeably more than you would up on the high ground. The old folks knew this. They set their morning claws in the low meadow, never on the hill. Now here is a second method for 2 kinds of folks. For those of you who live near the coast or up in the mountains, where the fog comes rolling in thick of a morning, and for those of you in a dry spell, where the dew just isn't coming. If you get fog where you live, you have a gift, and most folks waste it entirely. Fog is not vapor. Fog is already water, tiny liquid droplets hanging in the air, so fine they drift instead of falling. And all you have to do is give them something to catch on, a net, a few yards of fine mesh, the kind of shade cloth they sell at the garden store, for about $10, stretched upright between 2 posts, broadside to the way the fog drifts in. As the fog passes through the mesh, the little droplets catch on the threads, run together, grow heavy, and drip down. You run a trough or a length of clean gutter along the bottom to catch the drip. The trick with the net is to set it crosswise to the wind that carries the fog, the way you'd hang a sail to catch a breeze, and to use a mesh that's not too tight and not too open. Too tight and the fog flows around it instead of through it. Too open and the droplets pass right between the threads. A doubled layer of ordinary garden shade cloth is just about right, and it costs almost nothing. In the dry coastal hills of places like Chile and Morocco, whole villages get their daily water this way, off big nets strung on the ridge lines, catching the sea fog as it climbs. They are not doing anything you cannot do with $10 of mesh and 2 fence posts. If you live where the fog comes, this is the richest water you will ever gather for the price. And for a dry spell, when there is no dew and no fog, there is the green branch trick, the one the old survival hands swore by. You take a clear plastic bag, the kind of clean bag you'd use for food, and you tie it over the end of a living leafy branch, sealed tight around the stem, out in the sun. A tree is a pump. All day long it pulls water up from its roots and breathes it out through its leaves as vapor. Trapped inside that bag, the vapor has nowhere to go, so it condenses on the inside of the bag and runs down to the corner. By evening, you'll have a few good swallows of clean water in the bottom corner of that bag, pulled up out of the ground by the tree itself and handed to you through the leaves. It is not much, but in a hard spot, a few swallows is the difference the old folks understood. Now, friend, I made you a promise at the start, and I keep my promises. I told you I would not send you out with a claim I can't stand behind. So here is the honest truth about how much water this gives and how to keep it safe. First, the amount. This is not a well. It is not a faucet. On a good clear night in a place with some moisture in the air, a sheet the size of a card table might give you a quart, maybe more in the right conditions, far less in a dry climate. The fleece gives you a bowl. The fog net, where there's fog, gives you the most by far. Let me be plainer still, so you set out tonight knowing what to expect. If you live in the humid south, or along a river, or anywhere the summer air hangs heavy, and your bathroom mirror fogs in the shower, you will do well, and the dew will come most clear nights. If you live in the high, dry country, the desert, the plains in a drought, the dew will be thin, and some nights there will be none at all, and the green branch trick and a long patience will serve you better than the sheet. And everywhere the best nights are the clear, calm, cool ones after a warm day. A cloudy night gives little, because the clouds throw the sky's heat back down, and your sheet never cools. A windy night gives little, because the wind keeps mixing warm air against your sheet and won't let it settle and cool. Clear, calm, and cool. Those are the nights to set it out, and the nights to expect a full jar. But I will not stand here and tell you that a $12 sheet will water your whole household. It will not, and anybody who tells you so is selling you something. What this is a way to gather real water from the air for free, to water a garden, to fill the animal's trough, to have something in a dry spell, to never again look at a dew-soaked lawn and see nothing. It supplements, it does not replace. That is the honest shape of it, and the honest shape is the only one worth knowing. And second, the safety, and I will not skip this because it matters more than anything else I've said. Water from the air is soft and clean when it forms, but it picks up whatever is on the surface it runs across. Dust, bird droppings, whatever the wind left there. So you keep your collecting surface clean. You use food-safe materials, never a sheet that held chemicals or a rusty old barrel. And you keep your collecting jar covered so nothing falls in. For watering the garden and the animals, the water you gather is wonderful just as it is. But if you mean to drink it, you treat it first, the same as you would water from any wild source. You filter it, or better, you bring it to a good rolling boil and let it cool. Clear does not mean clean. The old folks who drank it boiled it for their coffee and their cooking, and they were right to. Gather it freely, but drink it wisely. Now I want to take a moment because this is the part that matters most, and it is bigger than a sheet of plastic and a jar. We have been taught slowly over a lifetime that water is a thing you buy, that it comes from a company through a pipe on a bill, or worse, that it comes in a little plastic bottle you pay $1 for, and then you pay again tomorrow and the day after that. Think on that for a moment. A bottle of water at the store costs more by the gallon than the gasoline in your car. They take water, the most common thing on this green earth, the thing that falls from the sky and beads on your grass every single morning, and they put it in a plastic bottle and sell it back to you for more than fuel. And we line up to buy it, because somewhere along the way we forgot that water is not something you purchase. It is something that is given. I won't tell you there's some wicked fellow behind it. It's simpler and sadder than that. There is no money in teaching a man that the sky waters his grass for free. Nobody can sell you a bottle of dew. Nobody can put a meter on the morning. So the knowing of it just went quiet, one generation at a time, until a whole country walked past soaking wet lawns every dawn of summer and saw only something to mow. And it grieves me, friend, because what was lost was not just a way to catch water. It was the remembering that we are provided for, that the same hand that made the air made the water in it, and sends it down fresh every morning, on the just and the unjust alike, free of charge, asking nothing. Listen to how the Lord fed his people in the wilderness, in the hardest of hard times, when they had nothing. The scripture says that in the morning the dew lay round about the camp, and when the dew was gone up, there on the ground was the bread, the manna, fresh for that day. Every morning the dew came first, and with it the provision. And they were told to gather only what they needed for that day, and not to hoard it, not to store it up in greed, because there would be more in the morning. That is the whole lesson, friend, sitting right there in the book of Exodus. Provision comes fresh every morning, like the dew. You gather what you need, you waste nothing, and you trust that the morning will come again. Isaac blessed his son and asked that God would give him of the dew of heaven. The prophet Hosea wrote that the Lord would be as the dew unto Israel, the thing that comes quietly in the night and makes the dry ground live again. The believers in the hard years, in the dust years, when they laid out a fleece on the open ground and wrung a bowl of water from it in the morning, they were not just being clever, they were trusting. They were saying with their own cold hands at dawn that the God who sends the dew had not forgotten them, and he had not. That is the inheritance the old folks left us, not money. Most of them had less than we can imagine. They left us the knowing that we are provided for, and the skill to gather what we're given, and the faith to trust that the morning brings more. So here is what I want you to do this week. Get yourself a sheet of food-grade plastic, or find a clean scrap of metal. Prop it at a gentle angle in the open middle of your yard, away from every tree and roof, with the whole sky open above it, in the lowest open spot you have. Set a clean covered jar at the low edge to catch the drip. Set it out tonight on a clear and calm evening. And in the morning, before the sun is up, go out and see what the air gave you. If you have an old wool blanket, lay it out too, and wring it into a basin. If the fog comes where you live, hang a net of garden mesh and watch it run. Use the water on your garden and your animals freely, and if you drink it, boil it first. Then tell me, down in the comments, did your folks ever catch water this way? Do you get heavy dew where you live, or fog, or are you in dry country? And go out tomorrow at dawn and put your hand on the wet grass, and tell me you'll never see it as nothing again. I read every one of these, and the old ways you share are a big part of why I keep doing this. Next time, I'm going to show you how the faithful kept food cold and fresh through a whole summer with no electricity at all, using nothing but clay, water, and the same quiet science we talked about today. It's the natural next step after this one. Subscribe and walk along with me so you don't miss it. Until then, look well to what you've been given, waste nothing, and God bless.